From the time I was little and my mom or my babysitter or my kindergarten teacher or anybody would read nursery stories or bedtime stories or Mother Goose stories or fairy tales or anything like that to me, I have absolutely hated the whole happily ever after. Even as a small child, I realized that was the laziest literary construct anybody has ever devised. Happily ever after. You're never going to have another problem. You're never going to have anything go wrong. Everything is going to be absolutely perfect. In addition to being completely unrealistic. Even as a child, I realized that was going to be boring as hell. You need an adventure. You need a conflict. I really loved the musical Into the Woods because of the tagline that went with it. Happily ever after was just the beginning. And it examines the characters in the major fairy tales. Jack and the Beanstalk, Cinderella, Rapunzel, Little Red Riding Hood. It examines everybody from where the story left off. And it wasn't a happily ever after. Some of them found out they were kind of miserable. In my stories, there is a satisfactory ending. There's never a happily ever after. Things work out. You've worked hard to achieve something. I let my characters achieve that. But a price has been paid. There's a loss. You don't succeed at everything. And if you look at the really good novels and good stories that stick with you, that's exactly how they end up. Looking at Harry Potter. Yes, Harry defeated Voldemort. He was able to build a life. He was able to overcome everybody that stood against him. He lost a lot of people that meant everything to him. And even the ones that didn't die, he realized he no longer had a connection to. Like Aunt Petunia, when she confronts him, when he was feeling outrage, and she reminds him, you didn't just lose a mother that night. I lost my sister. And he suddenly realizes that somebody else has been struggling with pain. Granted, she was not very nice to him, but sometimes that's what grief will make somebody do. In their own way, they were trying to shield him from everything he went through, and he insisted on going in it. You know, he loses Sirius, he loses Tonks, he loses a lot of the people that meant everything to him. He still wins. He still defeats Voldemort. Look at Lord of the Rings. Peter Jackson in his movie really conveyed something that might have been overlooked. Yes, Frodo saw to it that the ring was destroyed. He didn't do it directly. He did it indirectly. Defeats Sauron. Completely breaks apart the kingdom of Mordor. The men of Gondor and Rohan are able to, be free of this threat hanging over them. But the age of the elves is over. Gandalf doesn't have a job here anymore. No reason for him to stay, so he's heading into the west. So is Elrond. So is Galadriel. So is Bilbo. He will go later. But everybody else is heading away. But there was another sense of loss that, like I said, Peter Jackson conveyed. You remember when the Eagles and Gandalf went to get them on the slopes of Mount Doom after the mountain had erupted and everything. There were 3 eagles, but it was only Sam and Frodo that were being rescued. The 3rd eagle was for Sméagol. They were trying to give him a chance for redemption, and they realized that the only way he could achieve that was by being destroyed. He had been so overcome by the attraction, the addiction of the ring, that he never would have survived it. So if you understand that there can be a happy ending-ish, but don't make it unrealistic. Sometimes the hero doesn't always ride off into the sunset with the love interest. Sometimes victory is achieved at a terrible cost. Sometimes the victory is a hollow one. And sometimes they have to sit and they have to look at their motives. They have to look at their actions. They have to look at their outcome. And they have to decide, well, was it worth it? If you can at least get your readers to ask that question, you've really accomplished something. You can't get them to answer it because each person is going to see the end result from their perspective. And based on how they read your story, how they viewed the whole narrative, how they understood everything, that's the only way they can say yes or no, it was or it wasn't worth it. So at least get them to examine it when it was done, instead of feeling like you just got ripped off because you wanted the kids to go to sleep. So we're done with the story and they all lived happily ever after. Leave them with some questions, because not only is it going to give a realistic ending, it's actually going to make them want to see how the characters deal with this whole thing in your next book. Remember, sometimes happily ever after is just the beginning.